5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Please do not change channel.
From Krypton Radio, brought to you by Famous Faces and Funnies and Off the Chain with Yvonne Mason. It's the Hangin' with Web Show Radio Hour, the Internet's premier pop culture talk radio show. You're tuned in, you're logged on, and now, your host, award-winning author and journalist G.W. Pomichter. Who are you hanging with?
But I'll start out. I'm G.W. Pomichter, everybody out there. I am the host and producer of the Hangin' with Web Show. I am also an independent author in my own right. I have 4 fiction books that are currently available on Amazon, and 1 nonfiction work that is a political and how-to manual. It's how to run for office. In addition to that, I've done, again, as I said, 4 fiction works. The Lucky Marks Mystery Series, which is currently 2 novellas and a short story that is awaiting 4 more short stories to be the Lucky Marks case files. And a dystopian near-future book called Yesterday's Tomorrow, which is an exploration of human connections during a blackout on the eastern seaboard of the United States, which in the days of technology and the things that tether us together, i.e., Facebook Live that we're doing right now, this is an exploration of relationships when those things break down and how they function and how they could revert to a simpler time, as it were. So, as I said, I also produce the Hangin' with Web Show, which is an internet talk show series which focuses heavily on independent and small press creative artists, authors, filmmakers, musicians, and even online content creators, trying to share the work that everyone else is doing with the largest audience possible.
Okay, so you kicked us off at MegaCon 2015? So I'm trying to think all the way back. So back in 2015, I think that was the first time we sat on the couch with you guys and talked about comics in the classroom. And it was kind of just an idea then. And it turned into something so much bigger. Now it's taken 4 years, but we are finally out there on social media and we're finally getting our voices heard at conventions and really cool podcasts and webcasts that are a lot like this, that have given us an opportunity to speak to a bigger, broader group of people. It's a really long lag. Oliver.
Yeah, we have been very excited to hear the growth of comics in the classroom since that first time when we sat on the couch and it was an idea. Yeah, it is a really long. It's like 30 seconds, which is an eternity in video land. So, we were fortunate. We sat down with you that first year on the couch and talked about comics in the classroom and your plans and all of the things that you were doing using comics in your own classroom at that time, and the plans that you saw and would like to see in the future. And since then, we have been amazed by the growth of comics in the classroom. Early on, we know it was a struggle. It was a struggle to get people to accept comics as a form of literature, to see them, look at that for its educational value. It was a struggle to get parents and teachers and administrators to see the value in using pictures with older kids to tell stories because, once they get past that stage, there was a mindset that said, hey, we have to do this, the way we've done it for 100 years. We have to do this with, diving into, deep thought literature. And for the longest time, people saw comics as guys in tights and capes, and they didn't pay attention to the story. They didn't pay attention to what was going on in the lives of these characters, and so they couldn't see their parallels. And you have done a fantastic job as a spokesperson and an organizer making administrators and academics and parents as well as students see the value in comics as more than just entertainment, but as literature, as allegory, as this is the way we have passed stories down for 100,000 years, and it's an imperative that we recognize the value in that. I saw an entire it was a late-night talk show host diatribe on the dumbing down of people because of comic books. And what it demonstrated to me was a lack of understanding for the content in comic books and the lack of understanding of how human beings tell stories. And so, you know, you've done a lot of work. We know you have a lot of work to do. We're excited to be a part of it in any way that we can.
I agree with Frank Piercy here. He said, we told pictures were...
The lag is really,
Kidding.
really long, so I'll be hearing that in about 20 more seconds. And
Okay. Can you see the comment? Oh my gosh.
I can't. Wait a minute. Hold on. Let me see if I can. Do I have a chance to see? Yeah. What were the? Oh, and Frank, it absolutely can. That is the whole point. Is that, you know, these stories are age old. The hero's journey is a story we've been telling for as long as we could talk around the campfire, as long as we could paint on walls, and the complications of humanity, whether it be how we relate to each other with our differences, as in the cases of Nicole and I have talked many times about things like the X-Men and how that related to its messaging. And science fiction, fantasy, and comics in particular have done this for as long as they've existed. I don't think many people realize that the truth, justice, and the American way that Superman fought for in 1938 was the New Deal. It was a subversive part of society. It was making a statement about society at that time. I don't think a lot of people realize all of the thought that goes into the creation of both pictures and words in comics today. It truly is literature. It is meant to enlighten us. It is meant to help us in much the same way that many of the stories of their day are looked at today as, you know, in the horror genre, which I know it's funny. Brian was telling me earlier in a message that Nicole was watching a horror show today. Much of the horror community was, I can't see it anymore, can you? Much of the horror community is looked at today as kind of mindless entertainment. The reality is Bram Stoker's Dracula was made to comment and make commentary on British imperialism in the world at that time. So we need to learn to look at the things that are being written and drawn for their value in telling a human story. And I think that's what you've done so well, Nicole, is make academics and parents see that these are viable ways to teach our kids.
I think that
is crazy. I'm hearing myself over there. It's insane. It's like I'm in 3 different places, and I don't even like me here, so that's funny.
That was what was happening to me a few minutes ago, and it was hard to talk over myself.
Maybe the comments up on my laptop, that'd be great.
So Renee Shoup says the biggest argument that she's heard about comics is that it takes away from a child's ability to use their own imagination, and she said, what are your thoughts?
It's a great question. It is a really great question because so much of what is on a comic book panel is drawn out for the kids, is drawn out for adults even. You see an image. However, it is a commentary on an old adage. If you guys all remember back, hearing when you were growing up, a picture is worth 1,000 words. A picture is not 1,000 words. A picture is a single frame, a slice of life, a tiny slice of life. And it is up to the child or the adult or the reader to interpret between the frames. And it's in that interpretation where you can draw your emotional parallels. It's where you can find a place for your imagination. And in many cases, as a writer, I can tell you, being a writer requires being a reader. It means being inspired by contemporaries and other people who are creating awesome work and finding your voice in a sea of other voices. And so when you read a comic book and you walk away from that and you say, hey, I want to go draw a picture, I want to do something more than I saw on the page, you've been inspired by that. It hasn't really diminished your imagination. It's lit a fire in you to be more creative and more imaginative. And a lot of times we start out by mimicking the things we love. So a lot of times people will draw panels that they liked, and that's what they start drawing with. But they exercise that muscle in their mind to teach them how to master a skill and eventually tell a story. And your imagination is it's a special part of your mind. You should never inhibit it. But like any other muscle in the body, it must be exercised in order to develop properly. And so if something stimulates you and inspires you to use your imagination, then, go for it. And like I said, it's not what's on the panel, it's what's between the panels. It's the mortar between the bricks. It's the space between a handshake. That's where you use your imagination.
I couldn't agree more. And from an education standpoint, a lot of it is if we have kids that are struggling to understand what the picture is trying to tell them, like so many of our kids do, they even struggle with what the facial expressions are telling them. And that interpretation is important for them to continue to look at that art as a means to understand what's also happening. So it becomes so much bigger than their imagination. It turns into how do they take the information that's being given to them, not just what they can see, but also what they can actually understand from that picture and understand from the words that are joined with that picture.
Yeah, that is incredibly true. We use pictures now with kids who we're learning more and more about the way human beings think as we advance, and we use pictures to teach kids who have emotional disabilities or are on the autism spectrum. We use pictures to show them how people emote, to show them how people, what to look for in a sad person or a happy person, what to look for in excitement, and that's how we teach them to emote using their body language and their facial features. And pictures are an important part of that development. I don't think really understand how much comic books or cartoons or a lot of these very visual forms of art affected us when we were growing up. How did we learn how to raise our eyebrows when we were, questioning something? How did we learn, to smile when we're happy or to frown when we're sad? How did, I have a favorite saying when Cosplay Michael gets a little bit, he gets sad because I'm yelling at him and he sticks his bottom lip out. And I have a saying, put your lip away, you're not that cute. But in fact, he learned that somewhere, that putting his lip out and showing his sad face was important to conveying his mood. And so if your children are looking at these comic book panels and they're seeing anger and happiness and sadness, you're able to have a dialogue with your child now that you perhaps wouldn't have had because, we try to do our best as parents not to have those emotions as viscerally as they're had in a story environment. So that gives us a chance to have a dialogue that we may have been skipping before. I want to take a minute to say hi to Terri McIver, who's here in the chat, and also King Daniel Taylor, who is a comic creator. We want to say hi to those guys. Thanks for being in the chat with us, guys. I couldn't agree more with you, Nicole. It's so important that we show, not tell. And that's what a comic is all about, showing you, not telling you.
And good stories show us with words, but what if those kids cannot understand those words? They need something more. And that's where we're at. And plus, when we talk about even advanced kids using comics, those advanced kids are looking for more too. It's not just now what's on the page as far as the written word, it's also what they can get from the pictures as well. So now they're thinking in even a broader spectrum. So it's not just for our struggling kids, although it will promote reading and it will excite them about it. But it's also about the kids that are already there thinking about the world in terms of that broader, what does the story leave me? What do I have to get from the picture? What more do I need? And it just becomes something that really gets people thinking about what the author meant and what the illustrator meant, because oftentimes those people are not the same people.
Famous Faces and Funnies in Melbourne, Florida is leading the way in pop culture fun. From comic books and graphic novels to Funko Pops and collector's items, Famous Faces and Funnies has it all. Rick Shea and the professional team at Famous Faces and Funnies are friendly and knowledgeable. Whether you're looking for toys, props, collector treasures, or a new comic book, Famous Faces and Funnies is your one-stop shop. To find Famous Faces and Funnies on Facebook and Twitter, just type at FFF Comics.
The Planetary Alliance has fallen, replaced by the conglomerate.
Governed by the universe's most powerful corporation.
One planet stands alone. Earth. Captain Reginald Epsilon and his ship, the Stingray.
A new prototype warship that took a decade of research and development refused to recognize his new commander.
And he disappeared in the blink of an eye.
An
all-out manhunt for Epsilon and the Stingray was on. The ruthless Admiral Roth uses Epsilon's executive officer, the stunning Lieutenant Jesse Smythe.
And her little sister Maggie has pawns in his brutal game of cat and mouse.
Can Epsilon save Maggie?
And prevent the most powerful warship in the universe from falling into corrupt hands?
Hands hell-bent on destroying Earth? Find out in Stingray You Can't Hide Forever.
On Amazon.com.
From author J.C. Layne comes Playing in Tune. As Mitch and Jess set about putting their lives back together, each of them is dealing with their own issues. Life marches on, and Peach Buzz Studios is abuzz with bands coming and going. Mitch continues to record his new album. Brett and Jess's new label, Crash and Burn Records, is about to debut. How will the aftermath of their ordeal impact their relationship? Can their love carry them through anything? Pre-order Playing in Tune by J.C. Layne, book 3 of the Back on Track series, on Amazon today.
Yeah, well, it really harkens to a question of why do human beings tell stories? It asks us the question, why do we tell these stories? Is it just to convey the information like you would when how was your day, honey? I did this at work. That's really not storytelling. Creative artists tell stories, and those stories are meant to tell truths about the human condition. And so we do this. I have so many of these are kind of pre-rehearsed in my head because we've done them on panels before, you and I. And things like, what is the Incredible Hulk? Why is that important? What is the distinction between being able to do a thing and doing that thing? Should you do a thing because you're able to do a thing? And what are you letting out of the box if you do that? I mean, Bruce Banner, much like Dr. Jekyll, ladies and gentlemen, he set out to make himself a better person and instead unwittingly unleash the beast within, the primal man within. That's an important human truth. There are things that we do as instinct that society tells us we shouldn't do, that we should be better than. And so how do you teach that lesson? Well, in literature, they taught it in Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Don't let the beast out of the box. Bad things can happen. In comics, 100 years later, we told it with the Incredible Hulk. We told the same story using modern science instead of ancient science. And what did we do with it? We taught kids that there is something primal within them and that they have to monitor and check how they behave. It's a very valuable lesson for a parent, for a teacher, for an administrator. It's the lesson that they wanted us to learn when they made us read Robert Louis Stevenson, but we can learn it just as well by reading Stan Lee.
And I think that's the beauty of having a medium like comics, which the art oftentimes imitates what we've already seen in our human condition. And so it gives us a new spin on it, a new way to look at it. And a lot of times I talk on the panels about X-Men and how we had a safe place in my classroom to talk about racism. We had a safe place to talk about the way we use words, a safe place to talk about how people interact. And we took a very volatile subject for teenagers living in poverty-stricken areas and a diverse community. And we took that all away and said, we don't have to talk about black and white. We talk about mutant versus human and what it means to be those two things. And I think too often we allow people to assume that that is somehow less of a story to tell. But it gives people a place to talk about it without all of the stigma that comes along with being a racist or being ignorant at sometimes. Because even most of us want really badly to be able to just ask questions about things we don't understand. And if we're not free to do that, we're already assumed to be the label of whatever we really are trying not to be. We assume that the person is stupid and they don't understand and they just whatever. But this gives us a forum to answer those questions and have kids say, wow, I was wrong, or this is a lot like what I've already been through. And so it highlights a place where they can understand it in a much safer place.
Absolutely. And I think that is what storytellers have been doing forever. And I saw we have a question in the chat. What would you say is the biggest challenge to getting comics in the classroom? And I think Nicole just highlighted it right there. That is getting teachers, parents, and administrators to see the value in this kind of literature, and to start using that word. When you're talking about comics, you're talking about art and literature. They're important words to use because as academics, all of us through our college years and even through high school, we're sort of taught to look at literature as one thing, art as one thing, and comics as another thing. And that's the wrong way to look at it. Literature and art combined make comics. And that is one of the most difficult things. I know when we've done panels together, Nicole and I, those are some of the questions that we field are, why is Superman important? Why is X-Men important? Why? And it is finding those nuggets inside the stories that speak to the human condition the same way that literature does. And when you're looking at the X-Men and you can make a comparison between the X-Men and the time it was written and the racial relations of the time it was written, if you can find those comparisons to make, then you have an academic argument to make with a person that doesn't understand. And that academic argument is one that they're used to hearing. And so, but those comparisons are there again many, many times. That we just did the Hulk earlier. I just did the Hulk, but Nicole and I on panels together have done Superman, which is literally comes ripped right from the best-selling book of all time. The story of Superman is right out of your Bible, guys. You just have to find it. You just have to know how to find it. And when you find it, you can make that argument, and you can show people that it's not about guys and girls in tight suits beating each other up. Those are the action points, like what go into a Lord of the Rings movie. It's a hero's journey. Add tights and colorful symbols, and you make kids interested in learning the story and in asking the question to their teachers, hey, Miss Jobin, what does this mean? Most important question that they'll ever ask, what does this mean? Because it gives you a platform where you can explain to them what it means and how it is relative and relevant in their lives.
And it also becomes a place where we can actually talk to our kids about figuring out themselves what it means. What does it mean to them? Because honestly, everything means something different to another person when they read it. I mean, just recently I read parts of Superman Rising Sun. And I said, doesn't it change the way we would look at Superman had the circumstances been different? And when we start thinking about what that means to the mythos, but then we also think about what it means to our culture. How did that come from? How did we come from, it being a savior story to now it being something that we would be technically against at the start of the Cold War and all of our dealings with Russia. I mean, it makes us think about the differences between those circumstances and helps kids understand that my experiences make me who I am. And those experiences of people around me make them who they are. And we are better because we learn how to deal with those differences and understand those perspectives. And we have another question. So I guess to answer the question about challenges, it's not been the kids. It's not been other teachers.
Okay.
It's not been other teachers.
We have a statement. I agree. Alfred Jones in the chat. I agree. We should definitely.
PTA meetings.
Nope.
Discuss the importance of comics in the classroom. The brand new creator, I would love to do this to share our passion for what we are doing and how to help our kids. Yay!
The lag is beating us up here. That's great, though.
Yeah.
No, we should definitely expose parents, PTA meetings, and educators, as Nicole's doing. Nicole's been exposing educators to the notion that comics can be valuable pieces of literature, and she's been doing it with a great amount of success. The more times you make this argument, the more people say, oh, I didn't realize. I didn't realize that. Nicole's been able to look at it from a developmental psychology perspective as well and show people that, look, if it works for us when we're 4 and 5 and 6, learning from pictures, it'll work for us when we're 16, 17, and 18, or 25, 26, and 29. I'm an artist. I'm not a mathematician, guys. So if I counted that wrong, just go with it. But yeah, no, that is the exact point. Everybody's message is different, and so much of learning how to map our future to make a better world for our kids, for our grandkids, and for posterity is knowing where we came from. And superheroes are drawn as contemporary figures. Yes, they are drawn from literary archetypes, but they are drawn as contemporary figures. They deal with things like the rise of various sciences. Anybody ever noticed that all the superheroes from the Marvel Universe in the 1960s were all had to do with something radioactive? Because we were terrified of things that were radioactive. And we didn't know what would happen. Would we get spider powers or would we just die of cancer? We didn't know. But we had to have the discussion. And so that's what they wrote about. Go back earlier than that. It can be about aliens, which are basically the outsider. The alien is anyone who comes from far away. I know that you're out there right now all over Facebook and you're all listening to this stuff. We are terrified of things that are different than us. We are terrified of people coming from different places and sharing different lessons. And the only way to learn to accept that is to look at them with a different kind of eye, with a compassionate eye. And sometimes the best way to learn that eye is to see that, you know what, that person that you don't want sitting next to you because they come from here or they look like this could be the next Superman. That could be the one that saves you because he came from far away and became something more than we expected. So that could be the kid sitting next to you in class. That could be the next teacher that you meet. Your superhero is different. It could be your dad, your mom, a soldier, a sailor, an airman, a marine. It could be just some kid sitting next to you. Who is going to be your superhero? It's a great question, and it's one worth talking about, and it's one that we can provoke a conversation with if we can get over our biases and inspire these kids to talk.
Says that historical graphic novels will soon be included with regular history books because they are a much better tool. And I agree with that, too.
Alien invaders enslave Earth.
Unleashing hunters into the ruin wastes.
One young survivor struggles to elude their monsters, clinging to hope.
When he's stolen off the planet by a sarcastic starship AI, they pit their uneasy alliance against a treacherous galaxy.
Explore a whole new verse of barbarism and betrayal.
Wonder and adventure.
In the Scion series
by Michael J. Allen.
Beginning with Book 1, Scion Conquered Earth.
Available in print, ebook, and audio on Amazon.com. The Haunting of Hotel LaBelle by Sharon Buchbinder. Hotel Inspector Tallulah Thompson is called in to investigate renovation delays at the Hotel LaBelle. Love 'em and leave 'em, Lucius Stewart is cursed, stuck between worlds until he finds true love. Tallulah and her pug Franny are the first to see Lucius in a century, and he doesn't know what he's feeling as her stunning beauty and feisty attitude draw him in. The fate of Hotel LaBelle on the line, Tallulah and Lucius team up to save it, but can he ever let go of his past and learn to love again? Find out in this supernatural romance, The Haunting of Hotel LaBelle, on Amazon.com.
Now on Amazon.com, ICoin from author Jeremy Mosby. It's an alternate reality, and the leader of the planet ICoin is none other than Benjamin Franklin. When corrupt officials threaten not only ICoin but the Earth as well, an unlikely chosen one, Jeremy, must face dark foes to save the Earth and ICoin alike. Author Jeremy Mosby takes readers on a superhero's adventure through this compelling and imaginative alternate universe. Get ICoin on Amazon.com today.
Oh, and then Renee brings up another point we talk about drones and society and technology and all of our AI. All of those things are about things that we don't quite understand and we're still a little afraid of. What if it ends up becoming our end?
Yeah, these are all questions that it's been fantasy, science fiction, and comics. These are the genres that have explored those dynamics within humanity the most over time. And they explore them in a non-threatening way because it's a fantasy world. It can't happen, so we're not really worried about it. And since it can't happen, it's okay to hate an alien or a mutant. It's okay to play with ray guns. It's okay to do these things in this non-threatening environment. And then when we stop to think, all of a sudden we can start asking questions and we can be better human beings. And that's what literature has always done. And as she said, Rebecca pointed that out really well. These are all topics that are timely and that nobody else wants to talk about. Nobody wants to do a serious piece of journalism that dives into the what-ifs of drones and the morality of society and technology. These are issues that make people stand up and get defensive. Scientists get defensive of their work. People who are opposed to that work get defensive of their positions. We can't have an honest conversation because everybody has their barriers up. When we tell these stories in fiction, we can have an honest conversation. And, Rebecca knows more about that than many because I know Rebecca's in here from Hocus Pocus Comics, guys, and her husband Dwight from the Imaginative Voyages of Edgar Allan Poe. They're doing literature for kids. They're telling these stories. Edgar Allan Poe, dark poet, dark storyteller, looks into the pieces of our mind that we don't want to even admit are there, and entertains the hell out of us while he's there, and it makes us walk away and go, why do I think that's so cool? It's very dark and bloody, and why do I think that's cool? But we have to explore that part of our mind because we have to look at the reasons why we build societies the way we do, the reasons why we make the rules that we make, we parent the way that we do, we teach the way that we do. We have to understand why, and to do that, we have to look inside our darker minds. And, yes, it's wonderful to be delighted and entertained by a peek inside that dark crevice of your mind just before you close the book and realize that you should never tie somebody under a sharp pendulum.
Or cement them in a wall.
I'm catching up. Valid. Cementing them in a wall is seen as a very poor decision by almost everyone, except maybe some Masons. Not sure.
So, Terri McIver.
They sell the cement, so.
Terri McIver talks about 80s TV shows, talking about how we go out into society and become a better person, and doing PSAs and commercials that mention AI without bias. Comics have explored this in sci-fi for a long time, Rebecca says. So we really need to have those conversations and say sci-fi has already kind of looked into this world for us and made some really glaring comparisons to what's going on. A friend of ours, he teaches AP literature in Land O'Lakes. And he posted that there was a kid that her parents went up and argued the fact that she had to read these books. And at least one of them was The Handmaid's Tale.
Yeah, there are a lot of reasons why my smart house doesn't do the things that it was purported to be able to do. I can turn my lights on and off. I can turn my radio on and off, or my projector in the living room. But I don't let it run too much because I have read Ray Bradbury, and I know I don't want it to do too much because that will hurt me. Another shout out again. Sage is handing me notes to people in the chat as I can't look a lot of times. Andre Molinari dealing with subjects as advanced as grief and PTSD, all through graphic novels, all through comic art. Javier Lugo, Reconstruction and immigration, all through gang violence, all these issues, important, volatile issues that it is almost impossible to talk about when we read the news without ending up in an argument with your mom or your dad or your kids or your neighbors. When we explore these things in comics, when we look at them in their most exaggerated form, we're able to have a real conversation and get down to the nitty-gritty of what makes us human and what we have in common instead of what we're different. What differences we have.
I just wanted to make sure that we weren't
they just keep chatting in the chat, which is great. Terri McIver pointed out Hell 3000, yes. And then David Vincent Bob showed up in the chat room at the same time. No, Dave, we can't help you, Dave. Sorry, I had to do that because of the, Hell 3000 there.
I'm trying to count 30 seconds so that I can not talk over myself when you're trying to hear me.
It was funny, right off camera, Dina was just pointing out that someone... Yes. No, Dina just pointed out off camera that actually there are several writers and illustrators who have turned the Bible into a graphic novel so that they could teach kids. And we're reminded of a comic book series. We talked to comic book creator Cassia Taylor, who sat in our chair about a year and a half ago, and she does very, very parallel stories to biblical morality tales, everything from Samson to David, but she does them in the form of superheroes in a modern environment. And by doing that, she can show where these characters are relevant in a modern age. And you think about that. This is a piece of literature that we're drawing on, the source material that is nearly 1,500 years old and is specifically compiled to teach morality lessons to a population that at the time could not read. So arguably somebody should have thought about telling these stories with pictures a long time ago.
And they talk about the Action Bible being one of the most successful comic books of all time. I mean, essentially, we should have been doing that a long time ago. So I agree with you there.
Absolutely, absolutely. If we're going to teach our kids how to appreciate the stories that make us who we are, whether those are morality tales or the hero's journey, or even just observations in humanity, the way we act toward one another. If we're going to teach a generation to respect one another and to value the differences and the immense diversity in humankind, we have to do so in a way that compels them. And these stories compel young people through pictures, through a dynamic audio-visual stimulation. And so by doing this, we have to get them to read things. We have to get them to look at things, and we need to combine those together to create an immersive environment for them to explore their feelings about the topics at hand. And many of these topics can be translated directly into things that these kids will deal with in the not too far future.
And Terri and Rebecca were speaking about like our race as one race. We're the human race, and as to grow as that race, we have to embrace our differences and flourish. I think that comics gives us a place to understand those differences and a place where we can really harness our understanding of them. And if we didn't have that and we didn't have an open forum where we could talk about it in comics, then I don't know that we would have come as far as we are. We've got a lot of growing to do, but we are definitely looking at things a little bit more compassionately when it comes to understanding our contemporaries, the people around us, no matter what gender, no matter what race, no matter what ethnicity they are, no matter what, that we understand them as a human and understand them as people with trials and tribulations themselves.
And that is that. There couldn't be a more true statement than that. There really couldn't be a more true statement than that, because statistically speaking, you guys can all look this up if you want to on the internet. Bonjour. No, actually, statistically speaking, according to most journals today, there has never been a greater, safer, or better time to be a human being in all of human history. As much as we see on social media, as much as we watch the news, and if it bleeds, it leads, and we see all of these bad things happening, we are better as human beings than we've ever been before. And a large part of that is the journey that we're on. We're not better because we don't go to war. We're better because we try not to go to war. We're not better because we love all of our neighbors the way we should. We're better because we try to love our neighbors the way we should. We fail a lot, but we're better because we don't give up. We won't give up the ghost. We want to be a better version of ourselves, and it is in that quest that we rely so heavily on our art and our literature. Guys, I know it's going to be some guy in a suit with a striped tie in a political office that eventually makes a change, but that change is not going to come from that politician. That change is not going to come from those people. That change is going to come from the artists. we're going to tell the stories. We're going to tell the stories like Raphael told the stories, like Da Vinci told the stories, like Rembrandt told the stories. We're going to tell the stories as artists that eventually change the minds and the hearts of those people who are in power. And those stories resonating is how we make change to our society. It starts with an artist. It always has, and it always will.
I agree. So I was just thinking when we talked about what makes us human and the fact that we continue to try. Captain Marvel has become one of my favorite MCU movies, and therefore really, what's wrong with the dog? Really become one of my favorite comic books to start reading because I didn't know a lot about her. But people were always like, well, she's not really human and she's not really this. But there's that picture of her in the movie, that montage where she keeps getting up no matter how many times she'd been kicked down. And she keeps moving forward to fight for what she believes in. And I think that truly is the essence of the creator, as we continue to fight for what we believe in. We continue to push forward those ideals in whatever medium we can get people to listen. And I think that if we don't, then we're going to continue to have people that refuse to see the world in any other perspective. I mean, I don't have to agree with it. I don't have to love it, but I do have to understand it. I do have to look at it and say, you know, your experiences, that perspective is your truth, and I can't have any part of me that can tell you that your truth isn't worth it, that your truth isn't correct, because it is your truth.
Absolutely. No, that is the truth of the human condition. That you have your truth. I have my truth of my experiences of my life, and you have yours. But the truth of the human condition is we are built to get up. We are built to be knocked down and to get up over and over again and make life better. Every document, every form, every piece of literature, every piece of art ever forged is addressed specifically to posterity. It is addressed to who comes after us, how to make their world a better place. And that is what comics and literature and art has always done. It has spurred us forward and inspired us to be better than we are. Nicole knows me. She knows I'm a literary snob. I came to this place where I recognize comics and art as literature and as inspiration on a long, hard road. But as a literary snob, I will tell you, take this quote from me. Take this quote. It's not from me. I'm going to steal it. I'm going to rip it off. It's from Tennyson. Though we are not now that stuff which in olden days moved earth and sky, that which we are, one equal temper of heroic hearts, made weak by time and fate, but strong in will, to strive, to seek, to find, and not to yield. Do not yield. Get up over and over again and make the world a better place.
Joanne Fisher's The Spanish Doll. Secrets in Italy? Oh yes. Her beauty strikes him like a thunderbolt sent by the goddess Venus. When Fiore is given a peculiar gift, a Spanish doll, she is thrown into a whirlwind of entangled passion, money, secrets, and love. Get swept away today by Hangin' with Web Show featured author Joanne Fisher's The Spanish Doll. Available now on Amazon.com.
At Xavier'sManifestThyWill.com. Do you crave solutions to your everyday problems? Get rich, find love, and become happy. Xavier, master of the dark arts, may have the powers you need to prevail. Don't give up because other spellcasters have failed you. At Xavier'sManifestThyWill.com. Life does not have to be as hard as you see it. Xavier, an astrologist and psychic, carries out rituals and casts spells conscientiously, and he has the power to prevail in situations deemed impossible by other spellcasters. At ManifestThyWill.com, see for yourself the difference real magic can make. Go to ManifestThyWill.com today.
In Terri A. Wilson's Slow Burn, Atlanta is a city straddling two worlds. Remington Montgomery is a modern dragon, the city's finest detective and most sought-after bachelor.
Day Ito was raised to reign as the Dragon Queen.
When fate steps in, these two are thrust together to reign as king and queen.
To make matters worse, Day's sister has gone missing, and the unlikely pair must find her.
The problem?
Well, it's complicated.
Can this royal couple set aside their differences and learn to work together?
Can they learn to be together?
Find out in the first of a 5-book series from author Terri A. Wilson.
Slow Burn, available on Amazon.com.
This is Cosplay Michael with the Hangin' with Love Show. I want to tell you about my friends at Embellish Effects in Orlando, Florida. They've got makeup, costumes, and props for all of your costume needs. And the team at Embellish Effects is helpful and friendly. Embellish Effects is one of my favorite places, and I know it will be yours too. I'll see you there. Or go to embellisheffects.com. And remember, cosplay is for everyone.
I think we could pretty much end it right there. It's like the best way to end the show.
I'm looking at to read. I think we're on the lag sucks. Yes, it does. The lag really. I can actually see you in real time, which is funny. Like when we're talking, I can see you in real time, but the lag comes out over here at 35, 40 seconds later, and I'm like, what? She's done talking? Wait a minute. Her lips aren't moving, but her sound is still coming out. It's crazy.
Oh my gosh. It's like 30 seconds of us just staring at each other, smiling.
Rebecca McPherson, we love literary snobs. Thank you, Rebecca. It's good to be loved. There are a few of us left in the world, but we are dwindling our numbers by educating people and showing them that you can be open to other literature.
I think that's not true, though. We have to tell our kids that those things are still timeless. Some of them are still timeless. I don't agree that the Scarlet Letter is still timeless, but I do agree that Tennyson was a smart guy. And I do believe that what the mind of mayhem that Edgar Allan Poe had is still timeless, that we still deal with all of those same things. The things that go bump in the night still scare us. So I think we just need to teach our kids that those things are still true, that those things are timeless.
It is. Those things are always going to be timeless. You know what's great, Nicole, is I can actually see when you stop talking because I can see it, even though I'm still hearing you. So I think we've got the lag worked out a little. So, those things are all still timeless. And if it's timeless, here's a good piece of advice for you as a reader, as a teacher, as a parent. If you're looking at comics and you're looking at science fiction and you're looking at graphic novels and you're looking at these media, film and television. Ladies and gentlemen, Oxford University has finally recognized film and television as literature. If you're looking at these forms of storytelling and you're trying to figure out their merit or their value, ask yourself, are they retelling truths? Are they retelling stories that are still relevant? Are they telling Tennyson? Are they telling Stoker? Are they telling Stevens? Are they telling Dickens? If they are, then they're relevant and they're just as much literature as those great literary figures.
What is Thaddeus Howe's gurring at?
Okay, I can see that you stopped talking, but I can't actually hear it. I have to wait 40 seconds to know what that was. Gur, I don't know. Thaddeus, what would you like to know? Can we answer a question or anything for you? Or are you just angry at the way we see the world? Because that happens. Oh, what do you got there? I'm trying to read that. Backwards, upside down, and in... Oh, Godzilla. What is this? The covers are cool. What are they?
Godzilla.
Oh, Godzilla. Oh, Godzilla. Oh, my Lord. You know what? Let's real quick, Nicole. Why don't we go ahead and do that? Let's look at something like Godzilla, the absolute ludicrous, the absolute ridiculous. And we'll look at that because it's still relevant. And I'll tell you why I think so. Number one, first and foremost, science still moves forward at a pace that the human imagination can barely keep up with, and it's frightening. Because what's beyond the firelight, what monster will eat us in the dark, has always frightened us and has always made us think. It has made us safer. It has made us take a moment to deliberate before we do. So Godzilla is out there to remind us that while we're building these great things, while we're building AI, while we're changing genetics, while we're doing all these fantastic things, we could be letting the beast out of the box. We could be opening Pandora's box. Again, literature. We could be opening Pandora's box. And that makes us deliberate. That makes us think. That slows us down. I tell my children to this very day, small or big, be slow and deliberate. To be deliberate means to think, to deliberate before you act. I tell them that to this day, and I hope when they're older and they're breaking scientific boundaries, they are slow and deliberate. And Godzilla and all of the wonderfully cast monsters of the Godzilla universe remind us of the dangers inherent in our natural inclination toward exploration. I don't say we shouldn't explore. Of course we should, but I believe that we should do so slow and deliberately and with a lot of discussion.
And I think that
I made most of that shit up, so I don't know how it's going to work out.
I think it does have some valid points to it, though, because if we think about it, when Godzilla comes out of the water, it's kind of the same thing. That is the last place that we have not explored to its true depths. We can't go there. We can't see what's down there. So how could we begin to understand what's there? And so when we go, we have to be understanding of what could possibly be there and what the repercussions of it being there is.
I have to finish listening to this comment because I like that. I wanted to make sure I knew what you were saying completely, because those are the important things that we discuss when we talk about science fiction, fantasy, comic books, graphic novels. The things that ignite our imagination, that really make us passionate, they make us passionate for a reason. They touch us on a primal level. There's something hardwired in our brain. Godzilla is a giant dinosaur-looking kind of reptilian lizard thing. Godzilla's a weird creature, man, but he's hardwired to make us afraid, and yet he's the good guy. That makes us think. We're hardwired as human beings. We're mammals. We are part of the reptilian diet. We are hardwired to be afraid of that. And by being afraid of something and then finding out, hey, it's on your side, that's the good guy, boom. That makes us think.
And we had to look deeper at what was actually in front of us as opposed to just what we saw. We really had to think about the intention behind it.
Thaddeus, you're absolutely right. Slow and deliberate scientific exploration is real, and it should be real. It is something that we need to do. We need to continue to move ourselves forward. But that's also true of our society, and that's what Comics in the Class, and I keep coming back. I want to make sure we come back. That's what Comics in the Classroom that was explained to me so many years ago and that Nicole and I talk about so frequently, that is really what it's all about. It's growing as a society, using the tools we have, learning how to use those tools effectively to pass on knowledge, experience, and wisdom to another generation who will become lifelong learners if given the opportunity. And the opportunity comes in many, many forms. And when you're talking to your teachers and your parents and your administrators and all the people that you talk to in life, guys, if you're on the live feed here, if you go out there and you branch out, when you talk to those people, remind them of how they learned, how they became who they are. Because it all started with a picture book or a pop-up book. It all started with the very simplest method of telling a story. It could have been Grandpa sitting on the front porch with an iced tea and a rocking chair just telling you the story. But we all started that way. And we all need to make sure that we pass that on down to make the world better for the next generation.
And just to go back to a few comments that were up above, when they talked about what's the challenge, honestly, as what I found is it's not other teachers, it's not other parents even. It's actually administrators and the people that are in charge of our curriculum. It's looking at people saying, well, that's not worthy. And I'm like, it's not worthy because you haven't read it. It's not worthy because you haven't given it a chance. It's like looking at so many different media in our lives and saying all of these things combined teach us and guide us towards the inevitable condition that we're all striving to be better towards. And I think that if we don't give our kids all of these options, like novels like The Handmaid's Tale and other books like Fahrenheit 451, a lot of those novels, a lot of that great literature that our kids should read, Lord of the Flies, all of these things, and then also meet them with a myriad of different types of media, including comic books and including art and including music. That if we're not teaching our kids how to look at all of those things and understand them in the whole bigger picture, then we're clearly not doing our kids justice. We're not teaching them how to think about it.
Oh, definitely. It is an imperative that we convince our peers and those in authority Administrators are, generally speaking, very experienced and very highly educated individuals. The problem with that is that when you immerse yourself in your own education and your own development, oftentimes you get stifled in the era that you come from or the era that you live in. And so as times change, one of the most difficult things for any human being to do is change with the times. And as times change and as we expand our lexicon of ways to communicate with our kids, we need to be open to that. And a lot of times there's a huge threat there in academia that the more I'm educated, the more I'm experienced, and the more I know, the less I'm flexible to the new things that come along. And part of that is because it threatens my value of what I've gone through in life and my set of experiences. It doesn't devalue that. It simply gives you a new way of looking at the world, and we need to get through to these administrators and policymakers and these people who make decisions that it's okay. Your experience, your education, and your position is valued. It is important. But it is something that we would like you to apply to looking at this type of literature the way that it should be looked at, as literature, as art. Like I said, it takes a while to filter down, but guys, Oxford University, these are the guys that make up the stuff that we learn and teach and whatever long before it gets to us. These are the guys that they created medical technologies long before they ever got to the U.S. or to the Ivy League, which came long before they ever got to the major universities, and long before they got to our community colleges and those places. It all trickles down. Have now recognized film, television, and comics as a form of literature and art. Pop art from the 60s and 70s is now recognized as an art form, a valued art form with high dollar signs. So it takes time for these things to filter down, but it doesn't all come from up here. It starts with people like Nicole who are out there pushing every single day, because if we let them forget that we're artists, if we let them forget that we're storytellers, then they will not remember for a very long time. So the work that Nicole is doing and all of our comic artists that are here in the thread, and there are so many, Andrea, Javier, Rebecca, we have Terri, who works with artists all the time. Josh Bauer's been in the feed. D. Mack's been in the feed. Thaddeus Howe's been in the feed as a comic expert. It's the work that you guys are doing every single day, the conversations that you're having, that will continue to perpetuate the notion that what we do in popular culture and popular art is, in fact, art and literature and should be valued as such. And
no, I was just telling Brian I can't see any of the comments, so I can't see anything that anybody said.
How can we reach out and get? That's a good question, and Nicole probably has a better answer than I do.
I don't know the question.
Okay, Alfred Jones said, how can we reach out and get heard fairly by school boards and have this discussion? Answer, get involved, go to board meetings, find teachers that are doing what Nicole is doing with her group of teachers at her school. Support those people. Start with your parents. Start at the parents, go to the PTAs, etc. Work your way to the school board. When you get to the school board, just say your piece. Be heard. Remember, you're talking to elected officials, and also remember they have an administrator standing next to them that is a highly educated, very expensive degree. And you need to convince him as much as you need to convince them. So go in with a good argument. Go in there with all the talking points that I hope I've given you a few. I know Nicole gives you talking points at every event that she does. Go in there armed with knowledge. And no academic and no elected official can argue soundly if you have a sound argument, because there is no way that you can argue against artists when the artists are the ones that have taught us for 200, 300, 400 years, since the Renaissance, guys.
I think that a good point to make is that you have to start with the PTA. Be on the SAC committee. Be wherever the kids need an advocate. Be wherever anybody's going to listen. Because as soon as you walk into that PTA meeting and you say, this is a concern I have, and this is the research that shows it, they're going to look at it and say, hey, maybe that is a valid point, and let's learn more. And I think that then the next step is your school board. Go into your school board meetings and say, I want to add to this, or have you ever thought about, talk to the people who write the curriculum. I mean, I think there's too many people that downplay how important pictures are to our children. But there are pictures in our textbooks still. So every textbook that we have, there is some form of photograph or picture that is still being there to tell the story or to add to it. So we have to make sure that we're allowing our administrators and our school boards and the people that are writing curriculum to say, hey, you know, those pictures are valid. Those pictures add to what the children can understand. They add to how we can discuss things. Because if a kid can see it in the picture, but they can't read the words, they can still grow their knowledge and they can still understand what's happening. So I guess to end today's list, thank you guys for being out there and helping us. It didn't start with me, but hopefully it won't end with me. So until next time, like I said, keep reading.